The U.S. Navy declared the blockade complete 36 hours later. Iranian tankers kept moving. Not hiding, not running dark. Transponders fully on broadcasting live to the entire world. By the end of this video, you will understand why that single detail changes everything. Right now, 121 empty supertankers are racing toward American ports, and that is not good news. Here's the full picture of the Admiral's claim, the data that contradicts it, and what it costs you. Hormuz is 21 miles wide, narrow enough that on a clear day, you can see both shores simultaneously. Through those 21 miles flows 20 million barrels of oil every single day, or it used to. Since Iran closed it in February, that number collapsed to just 1.5 million barrels per day. That is a 92% reduction. Imagine 9 out of 10 lanes on the highway vanishing overnight. Oil hit $97 a barrel this week. Analysts say the slope of that chart, not the number, is what terrifies them. Here's the part that should stop you cold because most coverage got this story completely backwards. On Tuesday night, Admiral Brad Cooper made an announcement using language designed to end conversations. He said U.S. forces had completely halted 90% of Iran's maritime trade in under 36 hours. That word completely was precise and intentional, a message aimed directly at Tehran's leadership. Your economy is dying by the hour, and we are holding the knife. That was the arithmetic of the message. Iran's response was not a press conference, not a threat, not a missile launch. Iran's response was a supertanker, and it sailed through with its tracking system fully on. The Elysia, Chinese-owned, previously sanctioned, was carrying 2 million barrels of Iranian crude. 2 million barrels. That is enough oil to fill roughly 84 million car tanks across the United States. It moved through the strait overnight past 15 American warships transponder, broadcasting the whole time. Iran's state media announced it the next morning publicly, proudly, as a deliberate challenge. This was Tehran calling America's bluff in real time in data any journalist could verify on a laptop. And the Elysia was not alone. 4 more sanctioned tankers crossed in the same 48-hour window. The Christiana, the Merlin, the Peace Gulf, the Rich Starry, all crossed after the blockade went live. But the Rich Starry did something that reveals the real game being played beneath the official story. It crossed the strait, heading away from Iran, then turned around and crossed back the other direction. Then it switched off its transponder and disappeared near Iran's Keshem Island. Keshem is Iran's largest island, historically used for operations that benefit from zero visibility. The next day, another sanctioned tanker went dark in almost exactly the same patch of water. 2 sanctioned vessels. Consecutive days? Same location? After a blockade supposedly watching everything? Here's the question that breaks the whole official narrative open. How does the most powerful navy in history let this happen? The answer is geography, and it is not a flaw in the blockade. It may be the design itself. CENTCOM positioned its warships in the Gulf of Oman, the eastern side of the strait, outside the Gulf. A ship leaves an Iranian port, crosses the Persian Gulf, pushes through 21 miles of strait, then hits enforcement. The choke point the whole world is watching is actually where the blockade's gaps are widest. A U.S. official confirmed to CBS News the blockade applies specifically to vessels near Iranian ports. Not automatically to every sanctioned ship already at sea, not everywhere in the region simultaneously. Severely disrupted is not the same as completely halted. That gap is exactly where the Elysia sailed. And here is the twist that changes everything. That gap may be completely intentional. Stay with me through the next 90 seconds because what comes next is the part nobody else is explaining. A blockade so airtight that nothing moves gives Iran zero political room to accept any deal. A government crushed into total surrender at home cannot politically survive long enough to sign an agreement. A blockade with visible gaps lets Iran demonstrate defiance while absorbing the real economic pain. Real enough to hurt, porous enough to challenge? That combination is the exact condition most likely to produce a deal. The blockade was not the endgame. The blockade was the argument made in steel and diesel fuel. Every hour Iranian ports sat under interdiction was another hour. 90% of their maritime trade was choked. Iran's frozen assets abroad, billions locked in accounts across the world, were sitting untouched. Washington's demand hard caps on uranium enrichment, on-site verification, before a single sanction lifts. Tehran's counter-enrichment is a sovereign right, non-negotiable, not subject to foreign inspection. Those are not positions separated by a negotiating gap. They are fundamentally incompatible frameworks. And yet, here is what the press conferences are not telling you. The channel stayed open after talks collapsed. Pressure and off-ramp delivered at the same time, squeeze and release inside the same 48-hour window. Now let's talk about China, because what Trump actually did here is the most underreported part of this story. Trump sent Xi Jinping a personal letter asking Beijing to stop all weapons shipments to Iran. Then Trump posted publicly that Xi had essentially agreed and called it wise cooperation between nations. Here is what that post actually was. It was not addressed to Xi. It was addressed to Tehran. The message to Iran was simple and brutal. China is not coming to rescue you. The weapons pipeline is closed. China imports more Gulf oil than any country on earth it needs. Hormuz open as much as America does. When Iran closed the strait in February, Beijing felt it in ways its public statements carefully understated. When the U.S. moved to reopen it by force, Beijing faced a binary choice: resist Washington or accept the outcome. Beijing stayed out. America reopens the strait. China gets its oil supply back. That was the deal on the table. Here's the part that sounds technical, but actually determines who wins physical blockade versus financial sanctions. Iran spent years building a shadow fleet tankers that rotate names, flags, and transponders on demand. Front companies, complicit ports across Southeast Asia, cryptocurrency payments. Iran had beaten sanctions before. You can beat a financial sanction by opening a new bank account in a different jurisdiction. That is how it works. You cannot beat a destroyer sitting in the Gulf of Oman by opening a bank account. Different category entirely. The ships going dark near Keshem were not panicking. They were running a playbook refined over 2 decades. The real question, the one that determines your gas price for the next year, is whether that playbook holds. Against a physical fleet in the water, not a rule enforced through banks in New York and London. And that is exactly where the 121 empty supertankers enter the picture, and the math gets uncomfortable. Fox News ran that image of tankers rounding the Cape of Good Hope and called it proof America wins this crisis. Here is the arithmetic that graphic did not show, and it is going to reframe everything you just watched. The Persian Gulf normally exports 20 million barrels of oil per day to the world, every single day. After all redirects, SPR releases, and pipeline workarounds. The world is still short 11.1 million barrels daily. To put that in American terms, that shortfall exceeds everything the entire United States exports in a day. Each of those 60-plus VLCCs carries 2 million barrels, enough to fill 84 million American car tanks. That sounds enormous until you realize the daily global shortfall requires 5 of those ships every single day. 5 VLCCs per day. Every day. Just to break even. The convoy in that graphic does not come close. And here is the physical wall that no press release can negotiate away the port bottleneck. Saudi Arabia's pipeline to Yanbu carries 7 million barrels per day. Sounds like a solution? It is not. The port of Yanbu can only physically load 4.5 million barrels per day onto ships. That is the ceiling. You cannot push 7 million barrels through a port engineered for 4.5 million. Physics does not negotiate. This is the moment the America saves the day narrative collapses, right here, at a port in Saudi Arabia. Now we have reached the 8-minute mark. Here is the data signal that actually tells you where prices go. Global observable oil inventories. Oil that can be physically measured and verified are in a 2026 freefall. The inventory chart shows a steeper drop than anything between 2017 and 2025, with one single exception. The only comparable drop was 2020 going into 2021 COVID, when factories shut and nobody was driving. In 2026, the world is fully operational. Demand is normal, supply is the problem, and it is accelerating. The global drawdown is at 218 million barrels, enough to fuel every car in America for roughly 40 days straight. That buffer is what stands between current prices and the kind of shock that hits every American household hard. Every week that shortfall continues. That buffer shrinks, and once it breaks, prices move fast and they move ugly. Now here is something the defense briefings are not covering, and it matters more than the tanker count. 2 of the U.S. Navy's own tanker security program vessels are currently trapped inside the Persian Gulf. American supply ships, the ones that physically fuel American warships, cannot exit through Hormuz right now. And the USS, George H.W. Bush America's newest aircraft carrier, is not taking the direct route to the region. Instead of Suez Canal and Bab el-Mandeb, the Bush is going around the entire continent of Africa. That is 12,000 miles from Norfolk, Virginia to the Persian Gulf, the longest possible approach route. Why? Because USS Truman, the last carrier deployed, was hit in a collision north of Suez on its way in. The Navy will not risk a $13 billion nuclear carrier through 3 contested choke points in an active war. The detour costs 3 days at 25 knots, but the carrier arrives completely off any tracking system. Here's the logistics vulnerability that the Pentagon does not advertise. Stay with me. This matters. The Bush is nuclear. She does not need fuel, but the 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers with her do. At 20 to 25 knots, those destroyers burn fuel at rates the Navy's own documents describe as egregious. That is why the USNS Arctic is sailing with her a 30-knot gas turbine combat stores ship built for exactly this. 2 years ago, the USNS Bighorn, a Navy oiler, ran aground in the Arabian Sea mid-deployment. The USS Abraham Lincoln Battle Group had 0 replenishment ships for a period of time, none, in a contested zone. The Navy stripped Lincoln's escorts just to keep it operational. If that happens to Bush now, the Navy's word is cataclysmic. America currently has 2 fast combat stores ships, active Arctic, in supply. 2 more sit, mothballed. The Rainier and Bridge have only 10 to 16 years on their hulls. They could be reactivated. That call has not been made. The crisis is happening now. The decision to bring those ships back has not been made yet. If you have been watching this far, the next section is where all 3 threads lock together into one picture. Thread 1, the blockade is real and has disrupted 90% of Iran's maritime economy. Thread 2, the blockade is leaking 5 sanctioned tankers crossed in 48 hours with trackers broadcasting. Thread 3, America's own supply ships are trapped. Its newest carrier is avoiding every choke point, and its logistics reserve is thin. That 3-thread picture is the real situation, not the version in the press releases. Now here's the diplomatic layer, because while the Alicia was sailing, Pakistan's army chief was flying to Tehran. Field Marshal Munir flew to Tehran carrying what Iranian state media described as a new message from Washington. Iran's foreign minister, Arashi, met him personally on the airport tarmac, not a deputy, not a staffer. A foreign minister meeting a visiting general on the tarmac tells you exactly how serious that message was. Trump simultaneously announced new talks could happen in Islamabad within 2 days and set a deadline. The April 11th talks had been the most senior U.S.-Iran engagement in more than a decade, and they collapsed. Vance and Iran's foreign minister sat in the same room for 20 consecutive hours and nothing was resolved. Washington's position, hard enrichment caps, intrusive verification, and verification before sanctions relief. Tehran's position, sanctions lifted first, frozen assets released first. Then they would discuss verification. Tehran also wanted ceasefire guarantees broad enough to make any future American military strike structurally impossible. These are not negotiating positions that clever wording can bridge. They are incompatible end states. And yet the channel stayed open. Munir was in the air. The blockade tightened. The diplomacy continued. Do not miss what comes next, because this is where the Iran calculation gets genuinely interesting. Trump also mentioned King Charles was due in Washington soon, a royal state visit on a ticking clock. A state ceremony creates its own gravitational pull on timelines. Every government feels that calendar pressure. Oil near $100 a barrel means America's own allies, Europe, Japan, South Korea, are calling Washington daily. Every ally that imports Gulf oil is now an indirect pressure lever on both Washington and Tehran simultaneously. That is the full architecture of coercion naval blockade. Diplomatic backchannel, ally pressure, calendar deadline, all 4 running at the same time. Pressure and off-ramp delivered in the same 48-hour window. Now here is what this specific crisis costs an ordinary American right now, not in theory. In dollars, gas above $5 in California is already real. Brent crude at $97 is already baked into forward prices. That 30% oil increase has not fully worked through grocery prices, heating bills, and shipping costs yet. It will. The economic lag is what makes energy inflation feel invisible until your monthly statements arrive. Every extra week those tankers sail the long way from Texas to Asia adds roughly 40 cents per gallon at your pump. That math compounds fast. 6 weeks of Hormuz disruption equals 40-plus weeks of recovery minimum. We know this because the Ever Given got stuck sideways in the Suez Canal in 2021 for just 6 days. 6 days blocked in Suez, and global shipping took 6 to 12 full weeks to recover, 1/10 the duration. Hormuz has been under military closure for 6 weeks with mines in the water and armed drones overhead. This is not a container ship stuck sideways. This is a government with ballistic missiles enforcing its will. Here's what to actually watch over the next 72 hours, and exactly what each signal tells you. Open marine traffic right now. You are looking for 2 specific things, and they mean very different outcomes. Signal 1. Are sanctioned Iranian tankers still transiting with transponders broadcasting openly? If yes, the blockade is in its pressure and off-ramp phase. Talks are still mathematically possible. If all Iranian tankers go dark simultaneously, the blockade has moved into a fundamentally different phase. Signal 2. Watch the big commercial tankers, the non-Iranian ones, and which lane they choose. If they shift back to the international lane through Omani waters, away from Iran's new toll route, that is it. Commercial tankers choosing the Omani lane means insurers cleared it, and cleared means mines are gone. That signal supertankers physically moving through the old lane outweighs every statement ever made about this crisis. Not a handshake in Islamabad, not a post on Truth Social, tankers moving through that corridor. Now here is what each scenario produces in plain terms, for your household budget specifically. Scenario 1, deal is reached, mines cleared, traffic resumes, gas prices trend down over the next 6 months. Not overnight. 6 months of gradual relief because the tanker backlog does not clear in a week. Scenario 2, blockade holds, talks stay collapsed, oil near $97, gas above $5 in most major cities. Heating bills up, grocery bills up, every product shipped by truck, which is everything you buy, costs more. Scenario 3, the one nobody in the media wants to say, clearly the Houthis re-enter the fight. The Bab el-Mandeb is 1,500 miles south of Hormuz, and it is the last functioning bypass route out of the Gulf. Iran already struck the Saudi pipeline feeding Yanbu. The Red Sea export terminal took a direct hit. If Houthis seal the Bab el-Mandeb exit, Saudi Arabia has 0 remaining export routes. None. Iraq loses its outlet. The UAE loses its outlet. The entire Persian Gulf becomes a sealed energy vault. That scenario produces the worst energy supply shock since the 1973 Arab oil embargo cut off America's gas stations. We are not there, but every component of that scenario is already assembled and operational. So here's the bottom line, the thing both sides understand, and no press conference will say plainly. The blockade is real, and it is leaking. It is strangling Iran, and Iranian ships are still moving through it. Both facts are simultaneously true, and that combination is precisely the condition that produces a negotiated exit. Enough pain to force Tehran back to the table. Enough room for Tehran to accept a deal without total collapse at home. The Alicia sailing openly was not pure defiance. The ships going dark at Keshem were not pure evasion. Both were signals chips on a table where the stakes are the permanent operating rules of the world's oil supply. Iran wants to own the toll booth on 20% of global oil permanently. That is the actual negotiating position. America wants the strait open under terms that prevent Iran from ever doing this again. That is the counterposition. Those two positions do not have an easy middle ground, and the ships carrying the world's energy are caught between them. Field Marshal Munir was in Tehran. Trump had set a 2-day clock. Oil was near $100 a barrel. 3 more sanctioned tankers were sitting at the strait entrance waiting to see which way this breaks. A clock was running toward consequences neither side could fully control, and nobody had blinked yet. What gets decided in this window does not just determine your gas price this summer. It determines whether the world's most critical energy corridor gets a new set of permanent operating rules. Watch marine traffic. Watch the transponders. Watch which lane commercial tankers actually choose. The data on that map, updated in real time, is the closest thing to ground truth that currently exists. Not the Admiral's press statement, not Iranian state media at midnight, the ship positions on that map. In our next video, we cover the moment that has not happened yet, but is coming the first American interdiction. The first time a U.S. warship physically stops an Iranian tanker that is the most consequential maritime act in decades. We will break down exactly what follows the legal framework, the military risk, and what it means at your pump. Step by step, ship by ship, dollar by dollar, that video drops the moment the interdiction happens. If you're not subscribed when that moment arrives, you will be catching up instead of watching it live.